I'm just south of the Great Lakes capital city, covering all of North America via satellite, AM and FM stations all across the country, and live and archived on the World Wide Web. This is Govern America. I'm Darren Weeks, your host here for the next 3 hours, along with Nancy Levant. Nice to have you with us as we once again document the crisis of our republic, the undermining of our national, state, and individual autonomy, and our national security. And today is the 1st of June, 2013. It's good to have you with us once again, ladies and gentlemen. It's going to be a busy program today. We have two guests. Starting off here, we're going to be having Bill Kauffman come back on the broadcast because we have a lot of different things happening in the China front. So some of you who may have been following current events know that U.S. weapon systems were compromised or hacked by the Communist Chinese. And this came to light this past week. According to the report that we have, this really set back the United States in a major way. Some of the experts that were talking about this are saying that they're shocked, just absolutely shocked to the extent to which the future weapons systems that are being designed were compromised by the Chinese. One expert I was reading said that 25 years, the Chinese saved themselves like 25 years of research and development, as well as billions in development costs by this latest theft. And it's a cyber theft, I suppose. But it just underscores the importance of not allowing the Chinese to have access to our systems. It underscores the importance of making sure that everything stays secure, and part of that security is not allowing spies to come into this country to help compromise those systems. We're going to get into some of that after the break with Dr. Bill Kauffman if everything goes as planned. And so, anyway, I want to welcome up Nancy Levant here just before the break here. Nancy.
Well, good morning. How are you?
I'm okay. I'm hanging in there, surviving the thunderstorms quite nicely. Wasn't too bad last night, but I guess we're supposed to be getting some more today.
That's what I'm hearing, and I'm also fascinated by this Chinese situation with theft of military, very important military things, while at the same time, we apparently have invited them to come on over and do military exercises with us off the coast of Hawaii.
Yeah, that's just suicidal. It's crazy. It's part and parcel of the absolute insanity of our foreign and domestic policies today.
Part and parcel of the Hegelian dialectic.
Well, that's what I'm afraid of. Looks like we're being set up once again. I'll tell you what, we're going to take a few minutes away. When we come back, we'll bring up Bill Kauffman, former professor at the University of Michigan. He's going to be joining us again here on Govern America. By the way, I'm not going to be taking phone calls this hour. It'll probably be the last hour of the show before we get to calls. Just too much to cover. We mentioned before the break that we're going to be talking about the Communist Chinese this hour with Dr. Bill Kauffman. Before we bring Bill up, I wanted to quickly mention that Breitbart is reporting that Obama is to sign the International Gun Control Treaty on June 3rd. This Arms Trade Treaty, or ATT for short, is going to be signed apparently by the Obama administration on Monday. So this is what his plan is anyway. This lame duck communist president is hell-bent on disarming us. And, here we go again, folks. This really ties in very well with what we're talking about with regard to the Chinese today. Because, to be quite honest with you, folks, this is a part of the whole disarmament plan. Gun control is a worldwide UN problem. It's a worldwide UN initiative. State Department Publication 7277, Blueprint for the Peace Race in the 1960s. I think it was 1961 to be exact, where they were implementing disarmament in 3 phases all across really the world with every participating UN country. Title 10, United States Code, Section 153, puts our military basically under the command and control. Well, it requires the Joint Chiefs of Staff to participate in the Military Staff Committee of the United Nations. I think that's part number 5 under other matters. And keep in mind, under the United Nations Charter, the preamble of which says that no military would be used save in the common interest. So those that are participating in the United Nations or those that are participating in the military need to understand what their role is. It's a global peace, quote-unquote, peace force. So the question is, what is our role in the world with regard to keeping peace, listeners, when we're being made vulnerable by a communist Chinese power?
Well, Darren, and what peace? My goodness, we have...
That's, in true Orwellian fashion, they're calling every place they go to wage war, they're calling it waging peace. So we need to talk about all this stuff, but in particularly the intrusions of the communist Chinese in our military weapons programs, the designs for our weapons, and as Nancy mentioned before the break, the fact that we're now basically the Pentagon has invited them to take part in naval exercises off the coast of Hawaii while they're stealing our military secrets.
And we're selling them all kinds of things in this country. They just bought Smithfield, which is the largest pork processor in the United States.
Yes.
They just bought our entire hog market.
Yeah, well, a huge chunk of it anyway. I guess they're calling this the largest takeover, the largest corporate takeover by the Chinese ever. So anyway, I want to bring up Dr. Bill Kauffman. He was a professor of aerospace engineering at the University of Michigan, where he specialized in gas dynamics and propulsion. His PhD research at U of M was funded by NASA and concerned combustion instabilities, or two-phase detonations, which were occurring in the Rocketdyne F-1 engine, which was to be employed on the Saturn V rocket. As part of his career and on behalf of the government, contacts were initiated with the Soviets, leading to numerous technical interactions and visits to Russia by Bill. He even lived in Russia for a year after the breakup of the Soviet Union as part of U.S. efforts to keep Russian experts, weapons experts, from leaving and taking their expertise to other countries, particularly rogue countries. This exposed him to many American military and national security personnel, and it gave him a keen sense of how important it is to keep our technology secret. And that was at the time of the Cold War. Anyway, Dr. Bill Kauffman, thank you so much for being back on the program today.
Yeah, thanks for making your effort to educate the public about this severe problem that we have.
Well, this is a problem. You're right. We all have. Everyone in this audience and everyone in this country, and really globally, we do have listeners in other countries as well, should be concerned about the buildup of the Communist Chinese. I know for a long time there's been this ongoing dispute with the Chinese and the Japanese about these disputed islands. This actually has heated up as well. Just last month, the Chinese they've laid claim to Okinawa, and we have a bunch of our military troops stationed there. It's just remarkable. Let's start here at the beginning. Give the listeners, for those that have not heard, a little bit about your background in the past. I touched upon it briefly, but tell the folks what you saw at U of M real briefly and why you became concerned about this.
Well, the Chinese problem at the U of M actually was initiated far back in the late 1880s. Or in 1880 itself. James Angel, who was president of U of M, was appointed the first ambassador to China. So he established contacts back then. He brought back some Chinese to study at the U of M, and we have the Angel Scholars. But the things really ramped up significantly in 1979 when Jimmy Carter decided that China was going to collapse after Nixon had opened the gates. And he brought over here Chinese professors so that they could learn the skills necessary to stabilize China. Well, and then in the late 80s, all the Chinese industrial engineers began to come over to learn production because, if you're going to become a global power, you have to make something. And so they came over. And then with the winding down and collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991, the Chinese really came over in great numbers. Not only to the U of M, but at the U of M they sent over their specialists they're all engineers and scientists, to learn everything they could about our technology. And the last count I had, there's about 3,500 Chinese students, but they're really not students, they're spies. And in many of them, you can easily trace their connection to the Chinese military. And they're here taking the best things that we have, including one that implicates the governor, who is in, venture capital, and one of the devices that was developed in the industrial engineering department under DARPA funding, of all things, by a Chinese graduate student and his Vietnamese advisor, turns out to be a significant component for smart munitions, precision-guided munitions. Mm-hmm. So this solid-state timing device went commercial, and it was apparently exported to China illegally, and that's still pending. So the Chinese have the latest guidance device to put in their 155-millimeter artillery shells or whatever, complements of the University of Michigan. And when you start looking into the University of Michigan, there's an organized looting of our technology to take back to China. And if you remember in 2010, Apple was involved in some hacking, victims of hacking, etc. And it was shown to originate in Shanghai, where the U of M has their campus that they opened in 2005. I mean, we have a campus in Shanghai, China. We don't have a campus in Marquette, but we have one in Shanghai, China to educate Chinese. I mean, this is a bit strange for a state university to be doing this. And then we have up the road from me here, literally, Mike Rogers' congressional district, and he's chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, and he's known about the Chinese penetration of the U of M since 2008, when we personally gave his staff lots of documents verifying this, but he's shown no interest in what's going on. And then,
well, maybe he's profiting from it.
Well, that's right, and there are people who will tell you that his wife is involved significantly in cybersecurity firms in the Washington area, and you have the Mandiant report, which came out in the last 4 weeks or so, that says, hey, they're into everything, and who hasn't been hacked? And then, as you pointed out in the introduction here, specifically, we have the loss of current cutting-edge weapons technology going to the Chinese. 25 years.
It's just absolutely amazing. When we get back from the break, I want you to touch upon real quickly Harbin Institute, which is the Chinese facility where they send all their students to learn about weapon systems, because I guess that was really the thrust of the exchange program that took place between U of M and Harbin. And then I want to turn the corner and get into the significance of this breach, I guess, of security or giveaway, depending upon how you look at it. Our guest is Dr. Bill Kauffman. His website, by the way, china-threat.com, and Professor Kauffman for Regent.com. Stay with us, folks. We're just getting started. This is Government America. Darren Weeks, Nancy Levant. We'll be back in a moment. Our guest this hour is Dr. Bill Kauffman. He's a former professor at the University of Michigan, where he discovered he was really forced out because of his attempts at trying to talk some reason into the leadership there about the breaches of security with the weapons systems development that was going on there, and the exchange programs with the Communist Chinese, and in particular, Dr. Kauffman, Harbin Institute, right?
Well, that was a pretty barefaced attempt to steal the technology that we're talking about. I had a Communist Chinese department chair who came in 2005, and they knowingly hired this guy, quote, because he was Chinese. And he brought a delegation over in 2007 from Harbin, which is the MIT of the Chinese military, where they actually have a solid-propellant rocket factory. And, we went down to the conference room, and Wei Shi says to me, he says, I want you to tell my colleagues here the details of the design and construction of the Trident sea-launched ballistic missile. They had very detailed questions. Uh-huh. And I basically told them to drop dead. And at that time, the administration at the university deemed me non-cooperative and They didn't want the...
You're not a team player, Bill.
Right. You don't get the idea. And when I started writing memos and complaining overtly about this, they twice instituted proceedings to take my tenure. So I just decided to take early retirement and kind of oppose this full time. But everybody knew since 1998, when the Cox report came out,
right,
800 pages detailing what the Chinese had done up to that time. Mike Cox was a congressman from California, you'll recall, held Dana Rohrabacher's seat. And he documented the Wen-Ho Lee scandal at Los Alamos and other things. So everybody knew these Chinese were not angels. And I think you're forced to conclude that what is going on is sanctioned and well known by our political leaders.
I don't think it's not deniable. I mean, how could, and the thing is this is not a partisan issue either. This kind of stuff has been going on regardless of whichever president or whichever Congress, for that matter, is in office, right?
Yeah, both sides are making money off the selling of our nation. And you noted that I had participated in the Cold War, and we were clearly trained that the Soviets were an enemy and they would do evil things, and we had to oppose this. Okay? And if you saw somebody doing something and you said something, you expected results, and there would be results. And you can go back to the case of the Rosenbergs, okay? What the Rosenbergs stole is insignificant compared to what the Chinese have stolen, okay? And you tell people what the Chinese are doing. You tell the authorities, and you expect that something's going to happen, but it doesn't. In 2006, I gave the authorities a very thick three-ring binder notebook with all the emails and stuff that I had collected at the University of Michigan, and it went into the system, and I thought something would happen, but it didn't. And since then, you meet the front line of our national security people, and they're collecting all this data, and what they say is, well, we send it to Washington, and nothing ever happens because the administrators in Washington don't want anything to happen. It's very profitable for them to be making money off the Chinese. And then in May of 2011, I was in Washington, so I went around and met about 14 congressmen and senators and their staff and things. And my takeaway was, yeah, you're absolutely right. There are people in the administrations, say you can begin with Clinton and go through Bush and the current administration, who want this to happen. And when we oppose it, Frank Wolf of Virginia, Republican, he's been fighting with NASA over the transfer of Apollo-type technology that the Chinese will use to go there in 2025, okay, and has fought that and has been somewhat successful. But he says every time he does something to limit the Chinese access, he gets a call from the White House, he gets a call from Secretary of Commerce, he gets a call from SecDef saying, back off on this. And then you'll probably remember, I guess it was in April, at NASA Langley in Virginia and NASA Ames in California. Both of these are high-temperature gas facilities, among other things. There were something like 250 Chinese spies who were taking everything, including classified documents, knowingly, the whole way up to the administrator, Charlie Bolden, of NASA, and nothing was being done. There was an assistant U.S. attorney in California who wanted to bring charges, but Eric Holder squashed that. So the NASA employees, patriotic NASA employees, got together and said, we're going to scream bloody murder. Well, that's kind of pending. It's going out of the news, but it was finally the patriotic, people who worked there who decided to take action, and something was finally forced to happen, and they did, by the way, put one Chinese guy who had stolen hard disks and other things, thumb drives, on an airplane and sent him back to Beijing, but only because they were forced by the population to do something. People who...
and why did they bother to send them back to Beijing? They should have prosecuted them, shouldn't they?
Well, that's right. But Wen-Ho Lee, you remember, got off scot-free, too, at Los Alamos after he stole the warheads off the Trident.
All right, we're at the bottom of the hour already, believe it or not. Our guest is Dr. Bill Kauffman, former professor at the University of Michigan. He's a rocket propulsion expert, and missile defense system expert and all that. He had a lot of knowledge. We'll be back in a moment here on Govern America.
You're listening to the Republic Broadcasting Network, because you can handle the truth.
This is Govern America. I'm visiting with Dr. Bill Kauffman. Nancy Levant is here as well. I'm Darren Weeks, and by the way, the website is governamerica.com. That's governamerica.com. We have several stories pertaining to this Chinese espionage and Chinese really hacking incident that you can check out there. And also we have the story up there about how China is set to take part in naval exercises off the coast of Hawaii, which is just unbelievable. It's suicidal. The significance of the naval exercises, Dr. Kauffman, can you tell us why? I mean, I think most people probably, it should be common sense. Apparently common sense isn't very common, because tell us why it's important not to play war games with the Chinese.
Well, their purpose is to learn how to think like Americans and to see our latest toys. And I think there's some valuable historical precedents here that we can cite. In the 30s, the best and the brightest aviators from Japan went to college in California and got degrees, and then they went back to Japan, and they were the aviators who attacked Pearl Harbor because they knew how the Americans would respond, what tactics to use, etc. Mm-hmm. And, and speaking of Pearl Harbor, here in the last several weeks, I mean, we've had a couple mini Pearl Harbors. You've mentioned them. And did Roosevelt call up Admiral Yamamoto on December 8th and say, hey, let's get together and share some stories and have a drink or two? And then
the thing about that is there's a lot about Pearl Harbor that we haven't been told as well. And I don't want to get too far into that, but suffices to say, I mean, even the Hawaiian papers knew the Japanese were coming, and there were people that the fleet was actually moved in harm's way. So that Pearl Harbor, in my thinking, is a whole setup situation also. But we really don't have too much time to get into that deeply. But anyway, go ahead with your thoughts.
You didn't mention that next week Obama is going to meet with President Xi in Los Angeles to ask him, please quit hacking our computers. Be nice to us, And
right.
and this, to me, immediately brings up Chamberlain going to Munich and shaking Hitler's hand after he had just invaded Austria and coming back and saying, oh, here's a man we can deal with. Hitler's a nice guy. He's totally misunderstood. Well, I think we have to tell Obama, that enough is enough. And maybe you remember the last line from Boris Godunov, the people are silent. Well, you're making an effort here, and the Tea Party's making an effort, others are making an effort, not to remain silent anymore. And this guy and his minions down in Washington have to be outed and told that they have to enforce U.S. espionage laws. I mean, we have American interests, not the interest of the United Nations to watch out for. I mean, it's right. Americans who need jobs, it's Americans who need their freedoms, and we have to tell the government, hey, we elected you. We think we did, okay? We can't quite be sure, okay? Just because we let you vote doesn't mean that you live in a democracy. So we have to put pressure on the government to quit this monkey business and how to do it.
This latest hacking incident, they say that it was the most sensitive advanced weapon systems. There were 24 plus major weapon systems designs breached, programs that are critical to missile defenses and combat aircraft and ships. Defense experts, as I mentioned at the top of the program, they're shocked as to the extent of the compromise. It gives China the immediate operational edge in a conflict and accelerates China's acquisition of advanced weapons, military technology, while saving billions in development costs. As I said at the top of the show, 25 years, they estimate, of research development and billions in costs were saved by the Chinese just in this latest theft. how long is it going to be before? I mean, they've made huge gains already on the U.S. How long is it going to be, Bill, before they catch up and even surpass us?
Well, not long. Certainly within the decade. And again, we shouldn't be surprised because with consumer products, right, that you can buy at the dollar store and Best Buy, etc., what did they first do? They made Chinese copies, not Japanese copies, of our products. And then they did it with Halliburton oil exploration rigs, et cetera, and Caterpillar tractors. And they just went up the line. So they're doing that with the weapons systems. And also, in times of financial crisis like we're in now, you cannot maintain 11 carrier battle groups around the world. I mean, when I was living in the Soviet Union, transitioning to the Russian Federation, yeah, they had to call the Soviet fleet home because they couldn't afford the petroleum and the other things that it takes to run a fleet anymore. So we're going to have to contract because of the financial conundrum that we are in, created by ourselves, and they are a threat. They're not. I mean, you listen to these Wall Street guys who are making billions of dollars by moving our industry there. They say, oh, well, they're just like us. They want to be capitalists. No, the Chinese communism is much more insidious than anything that the Soviets ever put together. I mean, the Chinese have taken the best of all the evil models in the world and put them together to screw us. And these people on Wall Street and the government, apparently they've convinced themselves that the dragon will eat them last somehow, okay? And that, they're going to have Judeo-Christian values just like us, and everything's going to be hunky-dory. And, the New York Times published about 3 weeks ago a lengthy article on their takeover of the American auto industry. It's going on right under our nose here in Detroit and southeastern Michigan.
Right.
People know about it. They're aiding and abetting it, okay? And you remember, down at Milan, they were going to build a gated executive community.
I remember that.
Yeah, 4,000 square foot homes, etc., for these Chinese who are coming over here to do their internships as executives to live, and I understand they even hope to get in-state tuition for their kids at the University of Michigan. But
yeah, I think that Milan City was actually, the land is still owned by China Properties LLC, I think it was.
Yeah.
I'm going on memory, so bear with me if I'm wrong. I believe that was put on hold, was it not? Didn't they encounter some kind of a problem with that?
Yes, they did, and it was one man, or could have been one woman too, a township commissioner in the adjoining township. They came in with the final sign-off, here's the thing, et cetera, please approve. And this guy, the next morning, he called the Willow Run Tea Party, got a hold of me, okay, and he says, there's something fishy went on at the meeting last night. And we met, and he showed me all the documents, and it was clear, yeah, it was a Chinese takeover, and it was interesting, one of the little photographs in the real estate promotion or whatever of a model, architect's model in China, it had the Chinese flag flying over this community. So they were going to establish a little sovereign area of the People's Republic of the Communist Nation of China down at Milan.
Right here in Michigan.
Yeah.
And the thing about it is it's not just here in Michigan. They're doing similar things, my understanding is anyway, that they're doing similar things in Idaho and probably other states as well. These are foreign trade zones. These are...
Yeah, and the next thing on the horizon is this direct bridge to Canada. Well, it's really the Chinese bridge to the United States that our governor is pushing, okay? And, yeah, you always hear along with that, there's going to be a free trade zone where they can store their stuff and do whatever they want to do associated with that bridge. And then you get into the Schwarzenegger California experience of the new Oakland Bay Bridge, which was built with Chinese laborers and Chinese steel. And how did that help the American economy? By having this Chinese junk, will probably be brittle and fracture and rust and a few other things, come in. And we have to watch, even though it looks like this Drick Bridge has finally gotten some of the, or most of the approvals, we have to watch that like a hawk. What is really going on down south of the Ambassador Bridge, okay, with Snyder's new bridge from China. And I was astounded to read that our biggest export to China as a nation of the United States on a tonnage basis is recycled paper that the Chinese turn into boxes
Yes.
and then ship all their junk back to us. And when they talk about trade with China, is that what you want to trade in? Do you want to be selling recycled newspaper to the world instead of high-value manufactured products like we used to do when we had a much better financial picture nationally? But, yeah, I mean, these are really devious guys, and you got to watch them like a hawk, and nobody's doing that.
Dr. Kauffman, I want to interject. What's interesting to me is through some shipping databases, I found some information where I literally have a list that I've written in an article of literally hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of American corporations who have been in China using Chinese labor for, some 20 and 30 years. And this list is only 1% of the total U.S. businesses that are operating in China. And then I, of course, have discovered the Detroit Chinese Business Alliance. Recently found an article where the Chinese are actually planning on bringing in hundreds and hundreds of auto-related businesses into Detroit as well. So it looks like, maybe that's why Detroit was let go to the degree that it was, because it looks like China's going to take over Detroit and start another auto industry. And it's like, all right, it almost looks as if we're switching labor forces. Our corporations are going over to China using their people. I discovered somewhere that your average Chinese factory worker makes about $1.36 an hour. Then it looks like we're going to have China coming into our cities, setting up an auto industry, nonetheless, at least in Detroit, where you have, 95+ million American people have lost their jobs in the last decade in this country. And it's like, I've got this Agenda 21 thing in my head that talks about equity. And we're all going to be the same. We're all going to be the same all over the world. And, of course, my fear is, all right, we're going to be now building cars for the Chinese. Our corporations are using Chinese labor. Looks like they're going to come over here, and they're going to be using us as their labor forces. What do you think about that?
Well, I would say ditto Toledo. Most of downtown Toledo now is owned by the Chinese.
I know. Isn't it extraordinary?
And Toledo is almost the same economic basket case as Detroit. And then in the last week, we had these revelations concerning Apple Computer. Apple has 1 million employees in China. And then you take DOD just bought a huge number of iPads and iPhones and all this kind of stuff for use in DOD, which probably have trapdoor chips in them, among other things. And here we have DOD, which has to have a defense industrial base for when we go to war, depending upon Chinese suppliers to provide the computers for the battlefield. And what are we going to say to the Chinese? Well, we need another 1 million rounds of 50 caliber ammunition. Can you get them over here before your troops get here so we can use them against your troops? I mean, you wonder that if these people in Washington have any sense or not. And I would say, interacting with my local congressional rep, they don't.
Well, I happen to believe that our president is a communist. I mean, both of his parents were communist organizers. He was a community organizer, whatever that means. And it just seems to me that we are doing some type of a merger with this company. I know so many departments at universities are now headed up by Chinese people.
Oh, absolutely. There's hardly any Native Americans on the faculty anymore at the University of Michigan.
It was interesting. My daughter and I went up to Michigan State University, and we went up during the summer when the school was primarily let out. And I kid you not, every single person we saw on the street was Chinese, or was at least Asian.
I can tell you from firsthand experience that there are a lot of Chinese people at Michigan State University. And the problem is, it's not so much that we're against Chinese per se. And I want to make that clear because that's one of the arguments the other side likes to throw at us. Well, you're just a bunch of racist people. No, folks, the problem is when you have a communist country and you have people coming over from a communist country, you don't know who's who. You don't know if the students coming over here are coming over here to spy and to have access.
Military.
Yeah, and so this is the problem, isn't it, Dr. Kauffman?
Well, you get into why do we have these idiots in our government? Well, it's the party bosses who affect the nomination and running of the candidates. And here in Ann Arbor, you have McKinley Properties, okay, that was founded by Ron Weiser, who was a past head of the GOP. Well, who does he rent his apartments to? The Chinese students. So he doesn't want to chase the Chinese students out of Ann Arbor because they've made his McKinley Properties very profitable. So he doesn't want to get someone in Washington who believes in, democracy and patriotism and all this kind of stuff, God and country, because they're going to upset his economic apple cart.
Yeah.
Well,
and that seems... Go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say that seems to be one of the major reasons why all of this is happening is you seem to have some kind of coordination on the highest levels where there's just an outright treachery, and I'm still trying to wrap my brain around exactly why we are apparently being merged with China. But the other aspect of that is the people on the lower levels who are helping to implement this are profiting from it. And
well, then the other thing is, early on in my crusade concerning the U of M, I went to the unions, and I said, you're losing your jobs. What's going on here? You guys got to get active and whatever. Well, pretty soon you run into high-level union politics where perhaps the UAW is more interested in the welfare of the Chinese auto worker than they are the American auto worker because there's more, Chinese auto workers or whatever. So the people who are supposed to be defending the people who are being cheated don't seem to be doing their job. And what is to be done about this very real inconsistency that seems to exist? How do you organize the aggrieved and the people who really believe in the ideals that we have?
Okay, hold it right there. We have to take a break. We have one more short segment to go with Dr. Bill Kauffman. Stay with us. China-threat.com is his website. Professor Kauffman for Regent.com. We'll be back. Welcome back to the broadcast. This is Government America in the home stretch of this hour, finishing up with Dr. Bill Kauffman. Dr. Kauffman, we've seen a pattern of very aggressive Chinese tactics, notably harassment of the U.S. Navy vessels in the international waters, really for more than a decade. They have, we've had Xi Jinping making comments that he relishes a hand-to-hand fight with the U.S. It seems like they're actively and have been actively preparing for war with the United States for a very long time. I don't know. It's apparent that what we have here is a selling out. And the question is, what do we do about it, other than educate folks about the problem with broadcasts like this? But I guess, what do you recommend people do to try to even get the message out, but also to try to get through to someone in office and power that can actually make a difference with regard to this?
Well, I think you get active locally, politically. And this includes even running for the school board or running for county commissioner or running for regent. Whatever you feel that you can do and take care of. And then the other thing is you harass those who are in office. You go to the county commissioners' meetings and you bring up, even though it's Washtenaw County, what are all these Chinese doing at the University of Michigan? Or you go to the regents' meeting and you give testimony. You petition Tim Walberg to have a meeting with you. 5 of us have been pestering him since the Easter vacation to meet with him to discuss the China threat. He doesn't even acknowledge we exist. We went to Mike Rogers in 2008 and go up there annually. Like, we would like to meet with Mike and talk to him about the China threat. He gets on Fox News and talks about it, but he won't talk to us about it. And call the local office of the FBI, call the local office of the CIA, the DIA, and say, do you guys know what's going on at the University of Michigan or Michigan State or Michigan Tech? We don't like what's going on, and what are you going to do about it? Contact the Department of Commerce. Has a national security bureau to make sure that our governor doesn't export solid-state electronics for Chinese artillery shells. FOIA has been filed with them by Channel 7 almost 2 years ago, and they've ignored it.
Wow.
So you just have to become a pest, I guess, and also influence the party bosses, like Weiser, like Bobby Shostak, okay, like the guy who was head of the Democratic Party, the new guy who's the head of the Democratic Party, because they're the power bosses. They're the people who go to the country clubs. They're the people who don't want the protesters in their front yard. Okay, so you've got to affect the political system that we have, which seems to be badly broken.
Indeed. Well, very well put. And so, folks, basically, you just got to keep active and keep at it. And I would also add to that, you can try to write letters to the editors of the newspapers if you can ever hope to get it published. Sometimes they do. I think a lot of times, I know some of the things that I've written, they've hacked to pieces. But it would even be worthy of buying space in your local newspaper just to get the message out. Whatever way you can, and certainly passing out leaflets at public events, some people will throw them away. But this is the point, folks. Whatever way we can get the message out, and whatever way we can hold their feet to the fire, this needs to be done. Dr. Bill Kauffman, thank you so much for being with us. The time goes by way too fast. We'll certainly do it again, okay?
Yes, cheerio. Thanks.
All right, God bless. All right, folks, China-threat.com and Professor Kauffman for Regent.com also. All right, hour number 2 of Govern America is coming up, and Vicky Davis is going to be joining us. We're going to be talking about the subject of fusion centers. We started this topic 2 or 3 weeks ago, and so we're going to finish it up because we ran out of time then. So stay with us as Govern America continues here on the Republic Broadcasting Network. This is the second hour of Govern America. Darren Weeks and Nancy Levant here, and it continues to be the 1st of June, 2013, already well into summer now. As we continue here, I'm looking at the Department of Justice website right now, where they're talking about community-oriented policing services. Cops, and they say community policing is a philosophy that promotes organizational strategies which support the systematic use of partnerships and problem-solving techniques. Keyword there, partnerships, listeners, to proactively address the immediate conditions that give rise to public safety issues such as crime, social disorder, and fear of crime. Now, they go on to include a bulleted list of key components, and one of those components, in that list is community partnerships. They say collaborative partnerships between the law enforcement agency and the individuals and organizations they serve to develop solutions to problems and increase trust in police. Other government agencies, community members and groups, nonprofits, service providers, private business, and media. Now, I'm reminded, Nancy, about how recently, I think it was just this past week, the story came out where Walmart had actually reported a guy, he had interracial children, and they actually reported him to the authorities. They called the police and reported him for kidnapping. I don't know, did you hear about that?
Yes, I did.
I wonder if this is a part of the community-oriented policing service. See, Homeland Security has forged a partnership with Walmart back a while ago, and now we have them preemptively trying to stop crime.
They've also forged partnerships with universities.
That's correct. Yeah, that was another thing.
Yep.
So we have the tentacles of Homeland Security being interwoven throughout our entire life here. And at the center of all of this are these regional community centers, these regional fusion centers, which fuse military intelligence, basically, that's gathered on the population here.
With local.
Yeah, with local it all reports back to the Department of Homeland Security. So we're going to talk about some of this stuff here today with Vicky Davis, channelingreality.com. She's going to be joining us after the break. So stay with us, folks. 3 minutes out, and we'll be back. This is Govern America. Welcome back to the broadcast. Vicky Davis is joining us this hour. Most of you know who she is, but she began her career in 1976 in Silicon Valley as a contract computer system analyst and programmer. Despite having over 20 years of solid experience, well, she discovered she could no longer find work after the year 2000 because of the Knowledge Trade Initiative, which deliberately outsourced many American jobs primarily to India. It was the outsourcing of her job that led her down the long road of researching globalization in all of its aspects. She's joining us again on Govern America. Welcome back, Vicky.
Well, thank you, Darren. I like that song you had coming in. That should be my theme song, huh?
Well, that's the thing, is that every single thing that is done today with regard to terrorism, every single false flag operation or whatever the case might be, whether it's natural blowback, whatever it is. I look at what happened across the pond just recently, for instance. We had this soldier murdered in the streets, and I wanted to believe that this was just a natural blowback type of incident. This is the kind of terrorism that I would expect to naturally occur. And then I had a gentleman in Ireland contact me through our Facebook page, and he says, you need to take a better look at this. And I said, no. This is just a normal occurrence. Nothing to see here. Move right along. And he says, no. Look, you got this to consider. And oh, by the way, MI5 tried to recruit this guy for a job before he ever did what he did. I'm like, oh boy, here we go again. So I don't know what to believe on that. But immediately following that incident, we had the British government come out and advocate, David Cameron over there, in the Home Secretary, I guess, which to me looks like a lot like Homeland Security over here. Basically, what they advocated was more cameras, as if more cameras were going to stop this sort of thing. And that seems to be the solution, quote unquote, to everything is more surveillance of the population. Go ahead.
Well, and that's exactly right. Every event that happens is a reason for more technology. And so I think, it's safe to say that any event that the media covers, if you keep watching until they get to the solution part, it will be more technology. More cameras, more surveillance equipment, more an information system.
More laws buried in legislation.
Yes.
Laws to curtail us.
Yeah. And that is the whole agenda. When I started looking at the fusion centers, there, in one of the documents, the President's Commission on Critical Infrastructure Protection, they tie critical infrastructure protection to terrorism. But if you trace it back, the automation of the infrastructure, all of the systems that they're talking about, all of those systems were in progress before the first terrorist event occurred.
Right. Well, it's just like Homeland Security. I mean, they already had the Homeland Security plan in writing prior to the event of 9/11. That's what a lot of people, I don't think, these 9/11 truthers that research all the aspects of the physical and the physics involved in the demolition of the towers, or whatever terminology you want to use, the makeup of the attack on the Pentagon, the size of the hole and all that. I think they don't spend enough time really talking about the paperwork involved. And that, go ahead.
Yeah, most of those people who are leading those discussions, they're kind of like, they keep people in an eddy going around and around and around and never getting anywhere.
Yeah.
Because
that's my concern.
Yeah.
The key is that they had this all planned out in advance. They had the War on Terror planned out in advance. The PNAC report, put out by Cheney and Rumsfeld's organization, the Project for a New American Century, they planned all this in advance, had it all published a full year before 9/11 and even before the November 2000 elections. And Homeland Security, the Phase 3 report on national security was a blueprint for Homeland Security. So what you're saying is that, it's all boils down to the Hegelian dialectic. They have ahead of time what they want to put into place, and they put it into place after the trigger is pulled.
Right, because government systems were always authorized in law. And so, when they started this whole project of redesigning the systems of government, they had to break down those laws, your privacy laws, the barriers between agencies of government, all of those laws that protected us, protected our privacy, protected us from exploitation, all had to be broken down. Mm-hmm. And so the way they do that, even going back to Columbine, that was one thing I noticed about Columbine, is that after the Columbine episode, what they said is, we have to have information sharing between the school and psychologists and psychiatrists.
Oh, lovely.
We need that information, if a student is on some kind of psychotropic drug. But they never do it individually. It's just open-ended information sharing at that point, because the objective was, of course, to integrate that information into the student information databases.
Right.
So,
well, when we last talked, I think it was a couple of weeks ago now, we had started talking about your series on fusion centers. We touched upon 1980s industry beginning to move away from building systems designed for functional purposes to systems where data essentially becomes the purpose, it really is the functional purpose. And then we discussed basically the concept that basically everyone has a file. The information that is collected is essentially a file kept on everybody, and it's going into the whole thing where everybody's being kept track of and surveilled. And I don't want to touch upon all of this stuff again and redo, but we came to a situation, an individual, I guess, named Samuel Skinner, and I think that's where we left off. So can we talk briefly about Samuel Skinner and what his role was? I guess he was his transportation secretary under Bush or something like that? George Herbert Walker Bush?
Yes, he was the transportation secretary under Bush, and he is the one who initiated the project for the Intelligent Vehicle Highway System.
Okay.
That was his project. And he had been a prosecutor. And one of the things that I did, I included what was the design of the system from the beginning. And if you really look at that, let me tell you which one it is.
By the way, folks, her website is channelingreality.com. Her entire system, or her entire series on fusion centers is up there right now, near the top. So you can go there and read that, and I highly recommend it. And there's a lot of other research that she has up there as well.
Yeah, let me just throw something out too, Darren. There's something called the Civil Military Fusion Center, and it is a fusion center that operates their fusion centers, plural. They operate in Afghanistan, the entire Mediterranean basin, and also in Asia, I believe. And if you go to the website is CIMICweb.com. cimicweb.org. That's CIMICweb.org. That is the website for the Civil Military Fusion Center. And so, of course, these centers are operating globally, of course.
Well,
it's also the NATO Civil Military Fusion Center, by the way.
You're absolutely right, Nancy. This is a global system.
Mm-hmm.
Now, one thing that I had before, but, I find things, and I know they're significant. They're significant at the time that I find them. But then when I go back and I relook at them, then I really see the significance. Okay, so in March 21st, 1994, Al Gore went down to Brazil and gave a speech to the International Telecommunications Union. Okay, the International Telecommunications Union is a specialized agency of UNESCO.
Mm-hmm.
And what he said in here, I'll just read you a couple of lines in here. I have come here 8,000 kilometers from my home to ask you to help create a global information infrastructure.
Okay, I'm sorry I got to interrupt you right here. Let's pick it up with that quote after the break, okay? Folks, we're visiting with Vicky Davis, channelingreality.com, talking about fusion centers. Stay with us. We'll be back. This is Govern America. Darren Weeks and Nancy Levant here. And Vicky Davis of channelingreality.com. Check out her Fusion Centers series, and that's what we're talking about today, among other things here on the program. Vicky, before the break, you were just about to give a quote, and I had to very rudely interrupt you, or at least the clock did. So go right ahead there.
Okay, the next thing you said, besides asking the International Telecommunications Union
now
to
again,
help,
who is this again?
They are a specialized agency of UNESCO, the United Nations.
All right.
So that is significant just by itself, that he asked UNESCO to help build this global network.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, he said, I'm very proud to have the opportunity to address the first development conference of the ITU because President Clinton and I believe that an essential prerequisite to sustainable development for all members of the human family is the creation of this network of networks. To accomplish this purpose, legislators, regulators, and business people must do this: build and operate a global information infrastructure.
Yep.
This GII will circle the globe with information superhighways on which all people can travel. Okay, so he made it a global project right from the get-go. And Clinton and Gore, in their first 100 days in office, Gore met with the Russians, and he established the Gore-Chernomyrdin Commission, and they set up an agenda of cooperation that included technological cooperation.
Mm-hmm.
Clinton met with the Communist Chinese in Seattle on an island. The name of that island escapes me at the moment, but I'm sure it was for the same purpose, for cooperation to build this global network. Because when the Clinton and Gore came into office, they came in running with this technological agenda that actually began during the Bush administration, but Clinton.
Well, I wonder if that's why Gore invented the internet.
Well, yes, of course, yes. As a matter of fact, I thought that Gore's involvement in the creation of the internet started in 1991 with the High Performance Computing Act, but actually it started before that with the NSFNet, the National Science Foundation network. And IBM, of course, was a part of that as well.
So it wasn't so that we could download free songs and watch movies on Hulu then, right?
No. No, but they couldn't do this massive development project without making the internet available to everyone. And that's something that your audience should know. You know, all of the information that I find, it's all out on the Internet. They do white papers, they publish documents and reports, they conceptual design. All of this stuff is out on the Internet, and you can go read it for yourself.
You know, this is something that I have written about as well. One of the things that happened with the Internet is every person who has used it has self-profiled. They certainly didn't realize what they were doing. But, you know, there are many, many, many websites where people get on and they literally tell everything about themselves. The dating type of websites. You talk about your politics, you talk about your religion, you talk about literally everything about yourself. You have given your banking information over the Internet. You pay your bills, and so pretty much, you know, the Internet tells how much energy you're using, where you're shopping, what you're doing, where you go. And, you know, now we pay our bills over the Internet. Now our paychecks, you know, come into our bank accounts automated, and then we, of course, can get into them through the Internet. I mean, we have self-profiled. You know, the fusion centers, basically, all they had to do was connect to the Internet to find absolutely everything they needed to know about most of us.
Well, and that's what total information is. Total information awareness
everything
was a database of databases. And so it they've distributed it because Congress tried to put a stop to it. But, of course, you know, they just renamed the project and distribute it out to different agencies of government. So it's continued on, even though the Congress tried to stop it. But it was just...
Now they've actually made the Department of Homeland Security not only partnering with Walmart, they're partnering with Google, they're partnering with Facebook, they're partnering and, you know, commanding information.
Yeah, they're everywhere.
Right.
All right, I'll tell you what, hold your thought. Remember what you're going to say, Vicky, because I want to take this bottom of the hour break. We'll have a longer segment ahead. Stay with us, folks. Govern America continues. Vicky Davis is here. Her website is channelingreality.com. Stay with us. We'll be back in a moment. All right, we're back. This is Govern America visiting with Vicky Davis, channelingreality.com. We're talking about fusion centers and the global surveillance grid that's being built all around us. You know, Vicky, you were going to say something before the break. I wanted to give you a chance to finish your thoughts before I go on to another thought.
Okay, what I wanted to say was that this project is actually many projects. It includes rebuilding all of our infrastructure. And so Nancy mentioned public-private partnerships, and I just, you know, was able to articulate this morning, you know, as I was thinking about this. But it's going to cost trillions of dollars to rebuild all of our infrastructure with this technology embedded into it to have this 21st century vision of a fully automated infrastructure. Obviously, the government can't afford to do that, and so they set up this system of public-private partnerships.
Well, maybe they'll just have the Chinese do it.
Well,
you know,
it doesn't. They are doing that, but it won't really matter because the costs are so enormous that even every dollar that the government spends is a leveraged dollar with the private sector, which is why you're having private sector investment in our roads. But the thing is that because this project includes all of our infrastructure, every bit of it, it is too much money, and in order to recoup the investments, the private sector is going to be bleeding people dry. There's not enough of us to bleed to pay for the cost of this total automation infrastructure.
Yeah, it's just incredible. And the monopolization, you know, monopolies are never a good idea in the first place. But, we were talking earlier, and I wanted to come back to it. This is subject to the Intelligent Vehicle Highway System. They have a strategic plan regarding this. The advanced traffic management systems come into play, advanced traveler information systems, advanced vehicle control systems. I guess this is where we're getting into the self-driving cars that we've talked about a lot on this program, commercial vehicle operation systems. And of course,
don't forget about the smart ports.
Yeah, the smart ports
are part of it as well.
Well, these self-driving cars, I think I was telling you, what was it, yesterday that we talked, that I was listening to Leo Laporte. He's the tech guy. He has a syndicated radio show on Premier Radio Networks. He used to host Tech TV years ago on the, well, anyway, he's used to be very well known. Anyway, he does a lot of reviews of gadgets and things like that. And helps people with their computer problems. And usually he doesn't talk a lot about these types of systems that we talk about. And despite the fact that he's into technology in a major way. He recently had a program where he departed from that. And I think the reason why is there was, I forget how the whole subject of smart cars and self-driving automobiles came up. But he actually came out and mentioned about how good it was. I think, more. Ray LaHood has come out and he's said that he wants to work with the automobile manufacturers to basically disable people's ability to text while they drive, which, sounds good. We don't want people texting while they drive. But, he wants to take it further and, where any device that you have in a car would be disabled when you get into the car. And, that might be good for the driver. I don't know how well that would work out with the passengers, because if you're on a long trip, you might want to be able to talk to people. I don't know. But the point is that this led into the whole discussion of the fact that, soon we're going to have cars that drive themselves. Google has been working on this very diligently. They've had their cars out in California, which have been driving themselves, according to Leo, hundreds of thousands of miles with no accidents. In fact, he said that the only accident that they had was one where the driver, who was sitting behind the wheel, actually intervened and overrode the computer systems. So he looks at this as a very positive thing, and even took it to the conclusion that we've discussed before, where eventually people will not own automobiles.
Yeah, they won't.
He actually said that on the show. You will call your car. You will call for a car to come to you, and it will take you to your destination, and you will get out, and it will drive off. And then when you want to go back, you will call for a car, and it will come get you. But, like you said, people will not be able to afford automobiles, and he looks at all this as a very positive thing. I look at this, at Leo Laporte as a technocrat, but he seems to be very on board with the whole sustainable development idea of automobiles essentially being a thing of the past, except for when they're really needed.
Well, you know what? There's a lot of people as a matter of fact, I think most people in this country, they look at the gee whiz factor of technology, and they don't look at the downside.
Yeah.
And the biggest downside of all is the cost versus the benefit. I mean, I worked in the business a long time, and it was always based on the pragmatic, what is the benefit versus the cost. But when you look at the whole automation project for our whole entire country and expanded throughout the entire world, over Europe and China and Russia and South America, where is the benefit to offset the cost? Mm-hmm. There really isn't any, except totalitarian control of the entire population of the world.
Well, and Ed, I agree with you, because there is actually no technological benefit to the people of the world. there is something, ladies and gentlemen, called the Center for Applied Transect Studies. It's www.transect.org. On that website, you need to click on the term or the menu item codes, CODES. And you need to read what they call smart codes. And these codes, there is a new version of these codes coming out in 2013. And what these codes are is they're telling us how we're going to live. And these are codes that are given to planners and, city planners, so on and so forth. And these are the new road rules. And the bottom line is they don't want us driving. It talks about how we are to be driving bicycles and walking. And it talks about what the new building codes are going to be for these smart homes or smart apartments that we're going to be living in. And basically, absolutely everything is regulated. Your lighting is regulated according to these codes, and I've read some of them. Your lighting, your water, your heat, and, your air conditioning. Absolutely everything.
Yeah.
They have even regulated the types of trees that can be planted in communities and what height they have to be.
Yeah, you were telling me yet last night that it was something to the effect of they were saying, basically dictating in those codes that the trees actually had to be like a story tall, and that they wanted like 70 or 80% of the storefronts to be glass.
Yes.
Is that correct?
That is correct. All storefronts have to be at least 70% glass. In other words, so anybody can walk by and just look right in. And they're going to have these recreational spaces that are that fountains and some grassy areas, but we have to stay on walkways. And they're going to have like access to waterfronts only on walkways and bikeways. I mean, it's absolutely
Micromanagement.
Extraordinary.
It's micromanagement.
Well,
this is what it is.
Yes, micromanagement, but everything is technologically controlled. Now, what's interesting about the whole China connection with this is China is really the people who have built many, many, many smart cities. Many of them are ghost towns, but they've built many, many, many of them. And I think that a lot of these new codes, they're called smart codes, are probably coming out of China.
That's possible. Or UNESCO. I mean, they started on this design. I would think actually it's more IBM.
Maybe.
Yeah, because IBM has a section on their website called Smarter Cities. And if you go look at that, it covers all of the areas of our infrastructure that we deal with. You know, the energy, the retail, the emergency management. I mean, you know, they are right in the center.
Why would IBM be doing this? Certainly somebody would commission IBM to do this, would they not? Or is this initiative that just they came up with on their own because they saw a need or a perceived need? What would be their motivation for doing this? I mean, obviously IBM is Well, I was just going to say IBM is a multinational corporation, and corporations are driven by the motivation of money. But also control. I mean, don't forget, IBM is the biggest and the first real international corporation that has always been a multinational, and their whole business is centered around systems and systems thinking. I mean, that's their whole business. And so anywhere there's a possibility of a system where they can make money, IBM is there.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so
So we've got this North American International Trade Corridor. This is going to be tied into the smart highway system, right?
Yes. It's a global transportation system. It's not just the United States. They have designed a total global transportation system with the main transportation routes, the shipping routes.
Yeah.
Including the shipping lanes. That's the significance of the intermodal commerce zones, because they are ports on the global transportation system.
Yeah, and NAFTA and CAFTA. Yeah, Canada, United States, Mexico, and Central America.
Okay, now I wanted to tell you something. I've been looking at Agenda 21. Last time I was on, you asked me if this was if the fusion centers had anything to do with Agenda 21. I have to say yes, because I'm looking at Chapter 7, and in this chapter they talk about the program area being these things: providing adequate shelter for all, improving human settlement management, promoting sustainable land use planning and management, promoting the integrated provision of environmental infrastructure, water, sanitation, drainage, and solid waste management. Okay,
right.
Number E, promoting sustainable energy and transport systems in human settlements.
Yeah, and I would also say that we can't forget about Chapter 40 of Agenda 21 also, which is the deal with, the title of it is Information for Decision Making. This deals with databasing and having key indicators for sustainable development. And I come back to all this information gathering. That really feeds into the whole concept of where we are in the development or implementation process. They don't.
Yes, it's all management information, because that's the way the process works. Is that systems development is a continual, iterative process of design, develop, implement, and then review. How is it working? We can add on here. We can integrate this. It's always step-by-step planning for the next phase in the development. Systems are growing things. They're, I never really thought about it this way before, but as I'm seeing what they've done with systems and our world, systems are a disease.
Mm-hmm.
And psychopaths have taken over, and they are designing systems to control every aspect of everybody's life, of every process, everywhere, from the moment of conception till death.
Yeah. Well, you had talked in your piece that you wrote on the fusion centers, your series that you did, about the Oklahoma City bombing, and that it was really a Hegelian event to include critical infrastructure into the original intelligent vehicle highway system plan. Did you want to speak to that?
Yes, because of the cost, because of the intrusion, the violation of our norms and values in terms of privacy and everything else, they needed some big catastrophic event to push this project forward, because otherwise there'd be a lot of barriers.
Okay. Let's pick it up on the other side of the break right there. I think is a good place to pause it. Folks, we're visiting with Vicky Davis, channelingreality.com. Nancy Levant is here. I'm Darren Weeks, and we will open up the phone lines sometime in the next hour for your calls as we progress here in the conversation. You're welcome to jump on board and talk about fusion centers here with Vicky Davis. Stay with us. We're going to take a quick time out. We'll be back in a moment on Govern America. This is Govern America in the home stretch of this hour. One more hour to go with Vicky Davis. Channelingreality.com is her website. And Vicky, you were just getting ready to talk about how Oklahoma City was used to implement a lot of this infrastructure, critical infrastructure in IVHS. Intelligent Vehicle Highway System Plan. I want you to go ahead and pick it up where you left off there, please.
Well, you have to have justification. You know, you have to have something that will move Congress to act, to provide funding, to change the laws that will enable the development, you know, something to move Congress. And Oklahoma City did just that.
Mm-hmm.
But it wasn't just Oklahoma City. There was also then Khobar Towers, right? Now, I found an article on a .mil website about a guy who was there when the Khobar Towers in Saudi Arabia were bombed with a truck bomb, same M.O. as what went on in Oklahoma City.
So very similar attack, in other words.
Mm-hmm. But this guy made a comment to the effect that there just aren't enough policemen to do this job. Everybody must become a censor. Now, does that sound like a normal thing that people say? No, of course not.
Sounds like he knew what was coming.
Well, and it does. And as I read this article, the title of the article is Khobar Towers Changed Air Force Focus on Force Protection. And it was written in 2006. And when you read this, I mean, it's like the guy has a secret that he just can't stand, you know, he's got to give hints and clues. And this article is filled with hints and clues.
So we have a presidential directive, decision directive 39. How does that tie into all of this?
That was the decision directive that Clinton issued to make the protection of the critical infrastructure a national security priority. Now,
and why is that significant?
It's significant because basically it opens the door to do just about anything that they want behind closed doors. Anything for national security, of course, has to be funded, because otherwise the Congress would be blamed, you know, that they failed to fund something. Yeah. It moves the agencies of government to act on things that they might have inhibited otherwise, but you know, you really can't say no to national security, right?
Well, you know, unless you're inviting the communist Chinese in.
Well, that's the fraud of the whole thing. I mean, if you know, in retrospect, you look at it and he's saying, you know, we have to do this. We have to protect our critical infrastructure as a national security issue. But then they're inviting the communist Chinese in. They're letting them go to school at the University of Michigan.
Well, you know, the Mexican drug cartels. I mean, we can just go on with this. We have news reports that they're operating throughout the United States now, these Mexican drug cartel gangs, and yet the answer of the administration is, hey, we need to provide these people a path to citizenship when they come here.
Right.
You know, well, now we're providing them health care.
They serve a very useful purpose, because every time they do something horrible, it's just more justification, right?
Right. Well, you know, the purpose, in my view, and I think you would concur with this, is to deconstruct. Because whenever you're going to build a new world order, you have to deconstruct the old one. Do you not? All right, I'll tell you what, we're at the end of this hour. Hour number 3 is straight ahead. We're going to continue here with Vicky Davis. Stay with us. We'll be back. This is the third and final hour of Govern America. I'm Darren Weeks, and it continues to be the 1st of June, 2013, as we continue on here with Vicky Davis, and Nancy Levant is here, of course, as well. Vicky, I wanted to get into also, you know, and I don't know if you were done with what you were discussing there with regard to Presidential Decision Directive 39.
I did want to say something first. I want to put everything into context for people, so that they can look at all of this in the proper frame. Okay, the United Nations was founded on the idea of harmonization of all laws across all nations. one set of laws for the whole entire world.
Uh-huh.
Okay. It was also regionalism was a big part of it.
Huge.
Huge part of it. And why is that? It's because if you look at the United States or any country, take any country, and just look at it from the point of view of a management problem. Take out all of the patriotism, the history, and everything else. Look at government as being simply a solution to a management problem. When you harmonize at a global level and you normalize everything, then you see that the national government structure is redundant. And so you eliminate that. You eliminate the national governments.
Well, this makes a lot of sense when you consider that our national government is self-destructing right now.
Well, it is. And the reason it is because of regionalism. Because the United Nations works with NGOs and they will work with regional organizations. Mm-hmm. They also work at the national level with the national government through the State Department, but the State Department is really for foreign relations.
Yeah.
But you know, the UN works directly with regional organizations, and what is a regional organization? Well, it's NAFTA.
Yeah.
It's, you know, there is a NAFTA commission.
Yep.
And so when you look at these things as simply a management structure, the U.S. government is self-destructing.
Yeah.
And it's by design.
That's right. That's right. Because the regional system is the new management system. So,
yes. And
as they said, national governments are obsolete.
Yes, and it exists above the ground level where we can't even get to it.
All right, let's take a break right here. We'll continue here in just a moment. Continuing on here, I wanted to get into the Commission on Roles and Missions of the Armed Forces. This was something that you wrote about. This was May 1995, right? And speaks to the civilian-military integration. Is that correct?
Yes, because part of the UN agenda going way back to after World War II was the disarmament of all of the countries of the world, because theoretically, under this global system, there's going to be peace and harmony will reign in the world, right?
Sure, of course.
Yeah, so
everywhere these critters go, there's peace and harmony, is there not? Even if they have to enforce it at the barrel of a tank.
Yeah, except the whole problem with their whole idea is conflicting ideas just right from the get-go.
Mm-hmm.
Respect for diversity and harmonization, but they want to have one culture. You can't have one culture of everybody respecting everybody else's culture, because by definition, culture are the rules that you live by. So a different culture's rules conflict with our rules. So, I mean, the whole idea of it is conflicting right from the start.
Yeah, that's a very good point. You know, that's really the reason why there's a lot of resentment around the world against the United States, because we are literally forcing, and I say we, it's not us, it's not the people, it's not the average Joe out there or Jill, but it's the government. It's those that control the military and the military-industrial complex. We are forcing our culture, I don't know, I want to say values, but I don't know what kind of values we stand for anymore.
Well,
we're
not sure
enforcing this on the rest of the world. Go ahead.
I'm not sure it's us. I think it's the United Nations. It's UNESCO. Yeah. And I've been studying this structure that they set up, the United Nations and the specialized agencies, UNESCO, and our Environmental Protection Agency is kind of what got me started on it. But they have integrated their operatives, their channels right directly into our government. Mm-hmm. It's almost like tentacles of tentacles of a cancer cell or something, but they've integrated the channel right into our government. And that channel then communicates the global agenda, and that gets turned into policy in the United States. I, honest to God, don't think that we have a government where people that are Americans make American policy for the American people.
No, I totally agree. I don't think there's anybody
totally agree with that as well.
in this audience that would say that we do. I don't know how anybody, even in the average mainstream, I think that's one of the reasons why we have Homeland Security stocking up on ammo, because the average American is realizing what you just said.
Yeah.
We don't have our government. They're working against us every step of the way.
Yes. And if you trace the ideas back, it goes back to the idea of the one world system under the direction of agencies, the specialized agencies like UNESCO, setting policy that is one size fits all, except that it doesn't.
Yeah.
And so they really are the progenitors of all this conflict, because they actually set up systems that pit people against each other.
Right. They want to create strife because they want to always keep us fighting amongst ourselves. Now, you wrote about the Stafford Act, and I want to come back to that. That was one more thing with regard to Homeland Security. I don't know if we talked about that yet, but how was the Stafford Act used, and what was its purpose, I guess?
Ooh, I wish you hadn't asked me that, because I really don't remember. I'd have to look at it and read it.
The granting of FEMA primary federal power to control the domestic incident, which I think is very relevant, because FEMA is involved in every aspect today. I mean, we just had problems down in Oklahoma. I guess there were more storms that went through. Now, I bet you dollars to donuts, FEMA is going to be involved in that. So whether it's a natural disaster or whether it's a man-made disaster, terrorism, whether it's natural or, well, I don't know, is there such a thing as natural terrorism? But anyway, you get my point. FEMA has been given control of domestic incidents, and I guess
they do nothing.
No, right. Okay, well, again, go back and look at this whole thing as a management problem. Most policy, most things that the government does, it's done virtually in terms of on-the-ground contact with people. There just really isn't any on-the-ground contact with people in terms of most policy that the government implements. But now, when you're talking about a government function where they do come into contact with people, what is that? It's emergency services.
Yep.
Police, fire, disaster. That's where you really come into contact with government people, is the on-the-ground interaction that occurs as a result of an emergency. And so that's the significance of FEMA being given a leadership role.
Yeah, now, and we saw what they did in New Orleans during that crisis event. They went around collecting the guns. People didn't want to evacuate. They said, no, I think we can take care of ourselves. No, we can't have that. We have to take your firearms, and you have to get out.
Well, something that I read that I think is very, very interesting is that after 9/11, Article 5 of the NATO treaty was invoked. An attack on one is an attack on all. They then stood up Northern Command. Okay, Northern Command, I believe, is part of the NATO organization. I don't even know if they're Americans, honestly. But
well, they might be part Chinese.
It could be, yes, because there is an international security force that goes along with this whole global one-system government. And if you look at these systems, the fusion center systems are connected up internationally with Interpol. Mm. So they, start at the global level and go all the way down to your local cop.
Yep.
Well, and Vicky, let me just say this, too. I don't think that the fusion centers can really be as functional as they want to be until we are relocated into these human settlements or these new smart communities. The Energy Star appliances, they started with those. They sold those to us. Come to find out that reason why is because smart meters can read Energy Star appliances and shut them off. Then they put the bikes and the walking ways and the little gardens and all this stuff and this health movement all to get us community-based, right? Mm-hmm. And, at some point, particularly when you start checking out these new smart codes, what you find is we're not going to be able to leave these communities because we're going to have the option of a bicycle or walking on 2 feet.
Well, we do have high-speed rail, assuming they build it, but, And,
it's the fusion centers, the power of these fusion centers, I think, are when we are, number one, we're controlled through energy, through water, and number two, when we can't leave wherever we are.
Yeah, only the people who have permission will be able to leave. You're right. In huge projects, and in any project of an IT system, there is a phase-in period. It's kind of rare when you develop one and you just cut over to the new one. There is a phase-in period, and when you have kind of partially the old system and partially the new system, and you kind of build bridges until logical bridges until you can get to the next phase where you can close the gaps.
Yeah.
And so these projects that we're talking about, control of the entire infrastructure, the smart grid and the control of everybody's homes and appliances and stuff like that, it's going to have a long phase-in. And if you remember, they first said the war on terrorism is going to last about 100 years. Well, that's about how long it's going to take them to fully implement all of these plans that they have for this 21st century infrastructure.
One thing that comes to mind, when they first came out with the electrical grid, it was all about lights. People would say, well, we have lights, And once the infrastructure was in place to power lights, they added on technology to do other things, vacuum cleaners, household appliances, you name it.
Yeah.
And I think really that's where we're headed with this whole smart grid thing. Once they get the infrastructure in place, no telling where they're going to ultimately take it. Hey, we got the break here. Let's continue. We'll be back in a moment. This is Govern America. I want to go to the phone lines here and take a couple of calls here that have been waiting for a while. And folks, if you want to jump on board, you're welcome to do so. We have a lot of other ground to cover, but we do want to include you as well. 1-800-313-9443. That's 800-313-9443. Let's go up to New York and talk to Dave. New York is a place.
How are you?
I'm doing well. Are you in New York City?
No, I'm in upstate New York.
Okay.
Listen, what you're talking about really amounts to the reinserting of the human population. The reinsertion of serfdom.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
And feudalism. Now, what I'd like you to do, though, is to draw a few lines with me. None of this would be possible without vast pools of money. And I would also like to point out that anyone who is working for them or with them is complicit in their crimes. So you have a situation, these people are not even aware of it, most of the people who are working for them are unaware of their role in the whole thing. But like it or not, everything has a brain. We have to isolate what the brain is, find out what the sources of money are, make that all public. In other words, we have the Bilderbergs, right? what we need to start is the anti-Bilderbergs, a group of people who would basically make it their policy to go about and find out who these people are, what they intend doing, and publicize it wide. Smear the hell out of them. It's the only thing that we have left.
Well, that's kind of what I've been trying to do, over my research, is to figure out the who, what, where, why, and when of all of this. And you're right, people who are working on this.
And we've got to get off their money. We have to have our own alternative money. Now, it's not going to be Bitcoin.
That won't
do it. It's going to be something, but we cannot be complicit.
Dave, time out. I'll give you a chance to follow up. Let Vicky respond to what you said there.
Okay.
Go ahead.
No, that won't do it. Bitcoin is simply electronic currency, which is in keeping with the technocratic agenda. What we have to understand is how our nation is being dismantled, how our country is being dismantled. And the way you can picture this in your mind is to think about Islam, okay? Islam is a stateless nation. Their organizing principle is religion, okay? In the global system, that's the idea, that the organizing principle be something other than countries, that we have a stateless world. And what they've chosen to focus on is the environment, worship of Mother Earth, because we all live on Earth, right? So that's the organizing principle that they want to...
That's the common factor in all people. That's what they believe.
Yes, Okay, but the idea is of a stateless world.
Right.
Well, the thing about the Bitcoin thing, David, it seems like I remember just recently the Department of Homeland Security intervening and seizing one of Bitcoin's manufacturers, or whatever it was, vendors. Go ahead.
Yeah,
in other words, this is something that they're able to control, in my thinking. Go ahead.
They're going to try to control everything because that's the nature of the beast, is to control stuff.
Right.
But until we get to the point where we become conscious of the fact, though, that if people weren't being paid, they wouldn't work. So they are working for this monster being paid with their dollars.
Yeah.
And we have to come to the realization that anybody who does is complicit in their crimes. We should. Right. The message should be to come out of her, my people. You know what I'm saying? Let's get out of the system.
Well, you don't get out of it with Bitcoin. You just rush headlong into it.
Absolutely right. I am not an advocate of Bitcoin, but I am an advocate of some alternative something to replace the current money that we have.
Well, I would agree with you on that, and I don't know how Vicky sees it, but I do think there has to be some kind of alternative because...
I'll tell you what, let me tell you why that won't work. That won't work because all the money is on establishing these systems of control. You're not going to have a way to generate any income outside of the system that they have designed. Because the idea is for them to get you into the cities where they can control you. Mm-hmm. So, and with surveillance on all the roads, with your limited ability to travel, with, the chip in your arm so they can track your every movement.
Yeah, it's the insurfing of the human population. They are re-insurfing us. I'll tell you, if we do not do something quickly, and like I say, anybody who's working for them is complicit in their crimes. That's absolutely for sure, and that should be made clear to everyone.
Well,
I agree with you.
You're right.
All right, I'll tell you what. Let's pause this. David, thank you so much for your call.
You're welcome.
I think you're right. We do need to explore solutions for sure. So let's pick this up on the other side of the break. We also have other calls as well. Your calls are welcome. 800-313-9443. This is Govern America, visiting with Vicky Davis. Nancy Levant is here, and myself, Darren Weeks. We'll be back in just a moment. The caller really raised a very good point, and that is that we do need a medium of exchange. And I know this Bitcoin idea was floated, and certainly that seems to be something that is, it operates on their electronic infrastructure. So that, in my mind, isn't a solution either. But the problem is we need an area of exchange that's outside of their control. How do we do this? Is there any way possible to get it outside of their control?
That's not going to be a solution because of the design of the ultimate system. I really appreciate what Dave said because he made me think about this. The only solution that we have is to regain control of the management structures. Okay? Mm-hmm. If you go back to what I said and, ignore all of the nationalism, ignore the history, ignore the flag, ignore all that stuff, and look at this as a management problem. We have a fifth column kind of managing our country, and they're doing it through regionalism and international codes and all kinds of things. We have to regain control of that management structure.
How do we do that?
Well, by these regional agreements that they've had. Start with your local county and look at those regional agreements and regional plans and everything regional. Well, everything that is regional is done with a committee of people that are cross-jurisdictional. So, now what I would do, I would say, well, okay, they've set up these cross-jurisdictional committees. All right, well, let's pass a law that says we have to elect these people we have to consolidate into one region, and we have to elect those people. We can't let them escape the election process by setting up a cross-jurisdictional committee.
One thing that comes to my mind here, I'm just amazed at how many years regionalism has been going on, and yet you talk to the average person on the street, and they still would have no idea what regionalism is, or even that it is.
Well, that's because this is all administrative. And in order to understand administrative things, you have to actually read boring papers. You have to read what the law is. You have to read the plans, the memos, the minutes to the meetings, and, all the stuff, all that is the boring kind of stuff that people don't want to deal with.
Right.
One of the big problems that we have, I actually just put an article up about this. The title of the article is Administrative Integrity No Longer Exists. Here's the problem. When you get up into a management or administrative position, what happens is you are immediately sent into training on how to protect corporation, on how to follow rules. And people, the quote-unquote human resources, they are absolutely trained that everyone is replaceable. If anyone causes a problem, you not only get rid of them, but you set them up to get rid of them and get them out quickly. And they have no fraternization rules. They're not allowed to even get to really know the people who work for them. It really is extraordinary. The administrators are now trained to be very, very anti-human and to basically serve wealth and profit.
Yes, that is so true, Nancy. You can't systems engineers and systems design, they don't really take into consideration the human elements of what they're doing. Their focus is on the system.
Yep, absolutely.
And so they're designing systems, and the people are kind of incidental to that system.
Absolutely.
And so, yeah, they can't allow human feelings and human relations and everything else to be to get involved.
Well, and it makes it so easy from the administrative levels and obviously from governmental levels to simply dismiss what we think.
Yep. Hey, I want to speed this up a little bit because we're having calls pile up now. Let's go to Mark in Texas. Mark, you're up next with Vicky Davis.
Thanks for volunteering your time to each of you. Our elected officials, especially when it comes to the local folks, the reason they join these council of governments, it's all voluntary for them to join. But they do it so they don't have to think. They get lazy. I swear to you, Vicky, they do. I wouldn't do this, Darren, if it wasn't extremely important. Go to Vicky and Nancy, go to www.nctcog.org. nctcog.org.
Okay.
That's the website of the North Central Texas Council of Governments.
Yeah.
Across the top, you'll see some headers. I don't know if it's come up yet for you, but you'll see programs, topics A to J, topics K to Z, department. Don't point. Just point on those. Don't push. Don't click. Just point. Look at what these folks are all involved in.
Okay.
Yeah.
If you will do that, this isn't just some little haphazard folks that got together and thought they would make the region a better place. Guys, they're into everything.
Well, and see, you're so right about that. These people aren't doing this on their own. All of this stuff is canned. It's been handed to them. You do it this way. You get things done this way. They're handed these quote-unquote codes. They're told what to do.
Yeah, and they have their own marketing people that do the public relations to make sure that the ideas are sold in exactly the right way.
Exactly.
And every person, regardless of what state you're in, has these COGs, I'm sure, these councils of government. We have the Northwest Michigan Council of Government, the Northeast Michigan Council of Government, the Southeast Michigan Council of Government. I mean, it's just all over the place. This is regionalism, and this is really your governing infrastructure.
Yep. And they are totally out of control, out of reach of the voting public.
Well, they don't even know they're there.
Who they are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. In order to open it, you have to open up your mind to the fact that there is another branch of government, and that is the administrative, which is straight from regional government. But to get people to understand that's that glass that has to be broken. And Vicky, you had brought up before the Mobility 2000 project that was held in Dallas back in 2000, I believe it was.
Yep.
Vicky, one of the groups that spoke there had several speakers, don't you know? And one of them was the Rockefeller Brothers Fund.
Oh, yeah. Well, the Rockefeller brothers have been involved with the destruction of our government right from the beginning. The person who pushed for the United Nations to recognize regional organizations was Nelson Rockefeller. That was back in 1945. He was the Assistant Secretary of State. And that was his concept that he pushed as a part of the charter of the United Nations.
Well, for everyone out there, Vicky, I'm going to let you guys go. Darren, I know you got other callers. I want you to just pull up that website and just go.
I'm on it right now. I'm sitting here looking at the topics and just shaking my head.
No wonder we don't have enough bandwidth in America. The governments have all stole it. But anyway, you can go down through and just look and see, like Vicky was saying, the tentacles.
Yes.
It is. It's like a large squid, and they have got their hand, or they're manipulating in everything.
Absolutely.
Yep, exactly.
And the thing is,
it's all being
Thank you so much.
collected.
Thank you.
And back to the fusion centers. All of this stuff. I mean, I'm looking at this site. It's really extraordinary.
And there are no original ideas in there. It doesn't matter if you look at that Council of Government or the Council of Governments here in Idaho or the one in Arizona.
They're all identical.
They're all identical. I've said sarcastically that I think there are only about 3 functioning brains in the whole U.S. government.
Because they're taking their marching orders from the UN. You're exactly right.
Yes, everybody is brain sharing on the few who are working at the global level, making one-size-fits-all rules for everybody.
There you go.
There you go.
All right, let's keep things moving here. Let's go to Warner in Canada. Warner, you're up next.
Good afternoon.
Hi, Warner.
Hi. As I say, there's never an end to it about the problem and to identify them. And basically what at the basis is the ivory towers, they get higher and higher, and those that make the decisions are harder and harder to reach for us people at the grassroots level.
Yep.
Yes, that's very true.
And you just brought up the example of the octopus, in the governing agencies, and so national, international, regional, and so on.
Yep.
And I think a fair comparison would be to compare it with the bulletproof vest. You have many interwoven layers, and basically, no matter which way the bullet comes, the bullet in this case is when we as a people want to do something about the corruption and basically penetrate this now nearly unpenetrable layer of bureaucracy and hierarchies.
Well, they've got a global military, for God's sake.
Yeah, and you mentioned there earlier about the fusion centers. And the control, that they're basically being controlled by Interpol, International Police Organization.
Mm-hmm.
This might throw some light on here in New Brunswick. There, several years back, there was the chief of the RCMP. He covered up a pedophile ring. And as a reward, he got appointed to the head of the Canadian RCMP. His name is Zaccardelli. And when he did some bad things there at the head of, and lied to Parliament, then he got promoted as a head honcho in Interpol.
Because he's doing such a great job.
Yeah, it's such a great job for the new satanic world order.
There you go.
Well, most American politicians sell out for an embarrassingly small amount of money, but the few that won't then are probably being set up, through that honeypot system.
Well, we've talked about how they like to get people who are corrupt, like you were just saying, Warner, people with skeletons in their closet, people who have things to hide, because these are the people that are best controlled, because they can always threaten them with exposing their dirty little deeds if they don't go along and comply.
But a lot of people, they go along because those Satanists behind, they are so ruthless. When they threaten family members, dear ones, loved ones, and people often they have to take the choice: do they want to keep their loved ones, or the people that are dear to them and their children? Do they want to keep them from harm, or do they want to take the easier route?
Yeah. Well, listen, Warner, I appreciate the call. I have to move on here, get up to other people, try to get as many of these folks in as possible, but thank you so much. Let's go to John in Massachusetts now. John, you're up next.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon to you, sir.
Yeah, you've been hard to get a hold of. Trying to get a hold of you off the air. But anyway, I just want to recommend a couple of things. You guys, I just came in about half an hour ago, and the topic of money came up, and I just wanted to let you guys know. I'm sure, Darren, you know, and I don't know if Nancy and Vicky and your listeners know, but I think probably the top guy in the country on RBN on Sunday mornings, Bruce McCarthy. I think probably, if you get the archives, you guys could, because he's unbelievable. He's just amazing. And then, real quick, because I know it's getting towards the end of the show, there's two websites that I'd like to recommend because you guys are great researchers. So I don't know if you've heard of thinkorbeaten.com, but that is an unbelievable website. It's got chock full of information, so check it out, Think or Be Eaten. And then the next website that I'm going to promote is a guy that I'm sure you know. He's a little bit controversial, but I believe he really does know the Bible real well, and he's a former RBN caller. And his website is KeithSouthworth.com. It's pretty interesting stuff. So, I'll let you go with that. So you think I can get a hold of you after the show, Darren?
Yeah, I'll tell you what. Call me later on this evening sometime.
Great.
And I'll make it a point of being available.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Hey, thank you so much, John. I appreciate your call and your contributions. All right, let's go to Chris in Florida. Chris, you're up next. Do we have Chris?
Yes, I want to point out that we do have local options, that we should not rely on the federal government to be reformed, although there are good hopes. There's a glimmer of hope in H.R. 1979. The corresponding bill is SB 890 or S897. That is Elizabeth Warren's bill for a Federal Reserve discount window on the Stafford loans. It's only that one kind of student loan. And it's basically a partial nationalization of the Federal Reserve. It's basically a camel's nose under the tent to see if the president would exercise that authority, or Congress would exercise the authority, of course, as well, to grant 0.75% interest on only Stafford student loans, not any other kind of student loan, not a mortgage or any other kind of loan. So that's something that we can get behind, and a lot of Democrats and so-called progressive media are not reporting that. And also to point out the fact that we need to retake our wealth back at the local level, because we can't expect the federal government to do so. We need to try on both fronts. But there are options like community currencies that are very viable, as Ithaca, New York has shown for over 20 years. We also have public barter systems and publicly accountable community currencies, swap shops, time banks, and that kind of thing that are not Federal Reserve based. You want to avoid private monetary systems or private barter systems, which would take a cut of each transaction.
Okay, Chris, hold on. I'll hold you over the break. We'll respond to that in a moment. Stay with us. We'll be back, folks. Okay, in the home stretch of the program already, and what has got to be the fastest 3 hours in talk radio. Chris, I'm going to ask you to try to get to your point there real quick. I think you were outlining some solutions for us.
Yes, sir. It was that we want to avoid private monetary systems or private barter systems because they report back to the IRS via Form 1099. They are Federal Reserve based, and they get a cut out of each transaction. But just like the last Great Depression, we have community currencies springing up all across the country. Ithaca, New York, is probably the best modern pioneer. In Brixton, the UK, there's the Brixton pound that is very popular because what they've done on the local level is gotten their commission, or their equivalent of the commission, to allow their public employees to opt in to be paid 10% of their pay, and then they get an extra bonus of receiving another 10% of their pay in the Brixton pound. That helps popularize it, and we can take back our local law enforcement by helping them to realize that the national currency has been so debased, our sense of national unity therefore has been so destroyed, that their loyalty should stay local where they belong. So I would
listen, I appreciate that. I've got to hurry, but the clock is being really, really mean to us. Vicky, Nancy, do you have anything you wanted to say in regard to what Chris has said here?
I would say go to zerohedge.com. There's some really good articles up on the things he's talking about right now.
Yeah, I guess I don't really look at local solutions to anything, because I'm looking at the big picture, and I'm looking at the control systems. The monetary system, and no matter how you cut it, a community today cannot be totally self-sustained, because there are
they've worked so hard to make us interdependent.
Well, and there are too many things in our modern life that we depend on that come from other areas. So a community cannot be self-sustained. And so I'm looking at the whole big problem. And in the computerized control systems, control of our infrastructure, and with the plan for, quote, human settlements, and how they have planned to herd us into mega cities, mega regions, for control purposes, these interim little solutions of a local currency aren't going to mean anything in the long run.
Well, and you have to understand that the whole community, quote-unquote, element is part of this control system.
Okay, I want to go to John in Tennessee and squeeze him in before we go off the air. John, real quickly.
Well, Darren, I did this the last time Vicky was on. I apologize. I just wanted to comment on what Mark was saying in Texas. Not only is it your government's involved in it, I'm working for a corporation that has actually brought someone in that is working in our company, but they also own and are the founder of a company called Spatial Link, SP.
Okay, we got about a minute left in the show.
Okay. What they're doing, Darren, is they are coming down to not only where are they regimenting what we're going to do as a people, but they're coming into corporations, bringing these people that have developed and are working computer programs to actually regiment every aspect of your life. So it is about control. It is absolutely about knowing what you're doing, when you're doing it, why you're doing it, where you're doing it, and then ultimately determining whether or not they want to allow you to continue to do so. It is about slavery.
I appreciate the call. I really do, and I appreciate all the callers. Thank you so much. And Vicky, Nancy, thank you for being with us again. And folks, I just want to give a program note. I will not be here next week and the week after. Nancy will be hosting next week. She'll have Roger Mundy here. The following week, we have Melody Hallett. She's going to be guest hosting. And then we'll be back the following week. So I hope you'll stay and support the hosts and the guests on the network here on Govern America. And in the meantime, pray for this republic. Do what you can to restore it. God bless you, folks. Go out and have yourself a great weekend and a great week. Bye-bye.